Hi, it's Lili. Today I'm going to show you some behind the scenes of my latest stop motion animation. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to put the link above and in the description below. This animation was the most complex and challenging that I've done so far, not just for the amount of sets, but the amount of puppets, the whole storyline, multiple characters. I've learned a lot, that's for sure. And I hope that through this video, I can share of the thing that I've discovered with you and that it can be helpful for your own project. So enjoy the video. So to shoot this animation, I probably spent roughly 10 days in my studio, 8-9 hours a day. And I spent half of that time setting up sets, puppets, playing around with gears, adjusting lights. So the setup is really important to get the picture right. So I'm going to start this video talking about that. When I have a brand new set, for example, this formal dining room, I bring my puppets around. So far they've been covered with cling film to avoid all the dust gathering on the clay. So I take the first puppet, remove the screws from underneath the platform and start to position it onto my set. Then I take one of my super pointy sculpting tool, almost like a needle at the end, and I mark underneath the feet where I need to drill. Then I can leave the sculpting tool into the wood, remove the puppets, remove the table, and then I can drill into the base. That will create lots of dust, so instead of blowing on it and it will go everywhere in all the crevices and turn into a nightmare, I use some decorator's tape, which is just perfect to grab and control all the dust and remove it from the set instead of having it going everywhere. Then I take my screws, which are actually L-hook bolts, and I use some wing nut as well, and place them from underneath the platform to attach the feet of my puppets onto it. Then I can move the table back in, make sure everything looks right, and then I do the same thing for every single puppet up to the main character, which I screw from underneath. And then it's not just about attaching the puppet, it's about adjusting the posture so that it looks realistic in the way that it's standing for that scene. So in this set I had two beautiful windows and I need to put something behind it, otherwise it's just blank and a bit boring. So I reused some part of the outdoor scenery that I created for the cottage, so you can have the tutorial to know how to make it from scratch. I just place it behind my set so that creates texture. And then I use one of my favorite lights, an aperture 60x, which I use all the time when I want a strong light that casts some shadows. To adjust my light, usually I position my camera in the center with a wide shot so I can see a bit of everything. It doesn't need to be a perfect final shot, it's just to get an idea of how everything will look with this light. And then just going back and forth in between light to make sure I have the right position, the right angle. And once I have my strong central light, the aperture 60x, set up, then I switch on my practical light. I was lucky to have some LEDs which were all connected to the same remote. On my phone I had the app to connect with the aperture 60x so I can adjust it completely. That makes my life much easier. Once I was happy with the central light, I start to work on the side one with some GVB 800D. Some LED panels that are always useful to complement the main light. I wanted to start this scene on the sides, so I started moving things around, placing the main wall back in, removing the side wall, make sure the wall is screwed back into the base so it's stable. For that frame I wanted to have the parents' reaction to the main character, but obviously the main character was in the way, so might as well just remove it all together. I had a better shot. And then I can just play around with my camera until I have something that I'm happy with. The actual first shot of that scene was just the dad alone, and for that I was happy to have a lens that is 70-200, so that is close enough to have a really nice close-up shot. Once I was happy with this shot of the dad, I can remove the side wall, move around my camera and take another one with this one, the two parents together. Now, this shot includes something as simple as a blink. As you're going to see here, it's done. The blink itself is something that takes some time. On another project, I did pre-cook the eyelids so I can just place them back in. But on this one, I decided to do it full clay. And that means you have to reshape every single eyelid every time, make sure it's blending nicely. So a single blink takes some time. And you can see in the picture, the sun is doing a matrix move because basically it was in the way, so might as well bend it backwards so I have more access to animate the puppet. And each of my scenes and my set follow the same kind of principle and setup. So for the main set, which is the town hall, I also took my time with the lighting and the setup to get everything right. In a similar manner than for the other sets, I install my camera with the wide shot first. Then I start to play around with my side light. Those are the GVM 800D. Quite often I add some paper on top of the diffuser to make sure the light is even softer by the time it reaches the face of my puppets. Then I set up my main Aperture 60X at the back of the set, and I place 2 trees to diffuse the light and create some texture as well. And like every other set, everything is flexible. So I can just move things around, remove a wall if needed, moving my little desktop station until I have the best access to shoot the next scene. Once I'm done with the walking scene, I'm left with some holes into my platform. For that, I have some clay that I keep on the side in the same color than the floor, so I can just fill it up and it does most of the job. So for every single one of my sets, I have some clay left on the side, as you can see here, matching the color of the floor. And it's not just for the floor that I have this system of keeping some leftover clay of that right color. I have the same thing for every single character, as you can see there. So for each of them, I have the color of their hair, their skin, and their lips, so I can touch up during the shoot. Once I was done with the first town hall, I can move it on the side and then start to work on the conservatory, which had quite a lot of components, this one. It's such a lovely idea to have those open glass panel and windows up to the garden, but that means you need to put something there, otherwise it's just an empty space. And I was lucky to have all the components that I previously created for the cottage in my last animation that I can reuse. All of them are a bit modular, so I can just play around like Lego pieces and arrange them all around my conservatory to create this outdoor scenery. I've also reused the backdrop as well to make sure to hide my workshop behind it and to build it up to the ceiling, because the conservatory have some glass panel up to the sky, so we need to make sure that this is covered as well. And if you wonder where I put all my greenery, trees and everything, I have a little section of my wardrobe for just trees. I mean, some ladies collect shoes, I have different priorities in my life. And then I play around with my lights as usual, like every other set, make sure that my strong light light up almost all the whole set, so is my main sunlight. And I keep adjusting it until I had it right. Once that was done, I work on the other one. My first of the 3 panel light, GVM 800D, was full blast, bouncing on the ceiling, back to the set. And then I had my 2 other LED panel lights on the side with diffuser and much softer. Even though I have those lights all around, it wasn't enough to show the edge of the face, especially if you work with puppet with darker skin. I think lighting is really hard, and I discovered it on that shoot that it's really hard to get right. So you often need a bit of help. And for that, I've used my Aperture MC. As you can see here, I've hidden it behind the sofa because it's not just enough to get the right light. You need to hide them, because with this set the light is bouncing everywhere, so you need to make sure it's not in the shot. In this particular scene, I not only had my 2 puppets, but I had a baby there, and believe me, that's another level of sculpting when you have to work on something as tiny as a baby. It was very, very difficult to get it right. Also, I decided to attach it to the shirt, and I'm so glad I did, so I have an anchor point. Otherwise, as soon as you animate the hands around the baby, the whole thing is going to move around. So I think it's always good to find a way to secure props, or in that case a baby, to make sure that it's not going to move around all the time and make your life very difficult when it comes to animate it. I did some shots from above, and for that I had to set up my camera on the C-stand. Now if you decide to do that, make sure you buy a connector, because those ones don't come with the C-stand. You need to make sure to have one to connect it firmly to the camera so that everything is connected and very stable. Once I've shot this scene with the 2 ladies and their baby, I took the puppet out, changed the set of clothes, and then I had to resculpt the faces so that they look older. Obviously I had to change the hair color, and I took some time to add some wrinkle as well and try to make them look as natural as possible. Then I can position all my puppet back in with their new son, grown up now. And then I decided to shoot that set from the other side, and I'm so glad I constructed and designed my set in a way that the front panel could be completely removed so I can have access with my camera. Once that scene was shot, I can move back the front panel and screw it against the stud, then slide the front garden back in, And to shoot the last scene, which is much wider, I had to play around with all the little components and trees to create all the scenery around my conservatory. To have those components separate and adjustable are brilliant to create the best picture, because then you can adjust it to create almost like a vignette with like the trees and the bushes to go all around on each side and also hide my workshop behind it. Once all that was set up, I can turn around my desktop station, go on the other side of the set, make sure everything was ready, and then I start to animate going through the door. The access to the puppet is something that becomes more and more important for me every time I set up a scene. So for example, if I go back to the formal dining room, I was so glad I was able to remove the ceiling to get access from one door, for example, to make sure I can adjust my puppet every time with ease, to not make my life more complicated when I want to animate the scene. There was one shot, for example, which was quite emotional, and I wanted to make sure that I have very easy access to it and I can tweak things and create blinks without anything in my way, so that I can have the best performance out of my puppets. Then there was a scene when the puppet was walking out, so once again I need to access from the door. This time I decided to move everything around, my desktop station first, then clear out everything that was in front of me, so I have nothing blocking me or distracting me. Then I took my Dragon Frame remote once everything was cleared in front of me, and then I was ready to shoot and start my little dance going back and forth between my computer with Dragon Frame and the sets where I can reach my puppets through the door. In the last scene with that set, my puppet is walking through the corridor. Now that corridor was quite high. It was not the easiest one to animate, not only because I had to move my puppet along this tiny corridor, but I also had to make absolutely sure I was not touching the camera in the way, so I wouldn't have the image moving. So it's a very short scene, but it took time to get it right. So now the next scene and the next set also start with the corridor scene. I'm gonna first talk about the lighting. So first I set up my main strong light, the Aperture 60X. That's the one that casts the shadow. And I'm so glad I've got the app to activate and adjust it. So it was brilliant to have this shadow on the floor and on the feet of the character that is laying on the couch, but I needed just a bit more light on the face of the character. And this time I used the GVM 800D and I put it straight forward so that I can reach the face of my character. On top of that, I used another one of those 800D LED panel light to burst some light through the back door. As you can see here, it shows behind the face of the character. And last but not least, I need to have some light from the top of the staircase coming down, and for that I use an Aperture MC that I've duct taped on top of my LED panel light so that it comes at the right angle through the top door. Now there's one really cool shot that I've done with my curve slider. It's a Shot Villa motorized curve, 120 degrees. And it's a lovely piece of kit that I've used previously on my Gothic church animation. Honestly, it's a lovely toy and it creates some really cool effects. My only issue with it is that I wish the feet of that slider were higher, because with stop motion animation I already work with a platform that is raised, so I need something that go much higher to reach the level that I want. Otherwise, as you can see here, I had to grab some pieces of wood and boxes and stuff to raise the whole level, but it's not making it as stable as I wish. Now this Shot Villa motorized come with a remote. It didn't have any instruction when I bought it because that's just more fun to figure out on your own. And you can adjust a few dials to get the right speed, the right amount of movements. If it's for stop motion animation, technically you take one picture at a time, but you can also have it on a continuous movement to shoot it as a video. Now in this particular scene, my puppet was not moving, so I made my life much easier and shoot as one video. I've also done some tests, taking one picture at a time, moving it slightly, taking another picture, but overall it wasn't as stable as just taking one shot with the continuous movement. Now the last scene with that set, the man is walking away through the corridor. So once again, it was a bit tricky to do because walking scenes in general are hard, even more when you have a tighter corridor. At least this one was slightly wider than the previous set, so it was a bit better. But the trick is always to make sure you're not touching the camera when you go back and forth. The other major thing for shooting this scene was the access from underneath for the screws. As you can see there, when I set up, I usually position all my help book holds hole, I don't even know if that's the right name, anyway, the screws from underneath, and I positioned them already before even the foot is above it. But there's one of them that didn't have enough clearance. You see, when I built this set, I didn't put the stud away enough, so I didn't have enough clearance to be able to turn the wing nut completely. And that looks like a simple detail, but I can guarantee you that it makes a big problem because I was not able to tighten the wing nut completely. And if you don't have a firm hold underneath, that means your whole puppet is going to be completely wobbling above the base, and that's going to be creating a nightmare. Walking scene are already hard. Don't make your life harder, and make sure that when you design your set, you have enough clearance for every single screws and every wing nuts to move easily. There was one particular set, the miniature pup, that I reused from my previous animation, Love Has Many Color, which I did a year ago. So I was quite enjoying reusing this set, but I had to adjust a few things, in particular when it comes to lighting. So I had initially some small holes in the ceiling and some very tiny micro LEDs, and they were not powerful enough. So what I do is use my drill to make a much wider opening on the ceiling, and then from above I use my Aperture 60X full blast and create a box with some foam board all around to make sure the light will be spread evenly and will be projected through each of the openings. And that made a huge difference to this set. The last thing I'm going to talk about is dialogue. If you've done stop motion animation before, you know that dialogue scenes are very complicated. That's why I keep them to an absolute minimum. But for that scene in particular, it was important. Dean? No. Daniela. Okay, take a seat. So I'm going to show you how I've used the Dragon Frame software to help with it. First, I shot quite a few of those pictures just to have the initial movement when the receptionist is moving her head upwards. And then I wanted to include the dialogue. So open up the audio section of the Dragon Frame software, and then you click on Add an Audio Track. And you can see it opening up here. And then I went to my folder when I recorded the voices separately. So each file is a different sentence so that I can just take one sentence or even one word at a time. It's much more manageable that way. Then I can import audio and add this specific file onto my track. And then I can move it around to place it exactly where I want so that it fits where I want my dialogue to start. And then I start to animate the puppet so that the mouth will move and follow each words. And as you can see here, when it's all done, you can spot the audio tracks is changing, and you can see the face of my puppet is slowly moving to follow those little words. So this is the whole process of how I've shot my animation. So I spend roughly 8 or 9 hours a day in my studio. In the past, I did try to spend much more time in the studio, but I end up very tired, knackered physically as well. I end up cutting corners, making mistakes, and I end up regretting it. So if I stick to an 8 or 9 hour-ish, I know I have the best picture out of it. So it's much more manageable on the long term. So at the end of each day, I take the time to copy all my files onto my main computer, to convert them, make sure they're super organized, and also get a rough edit so I can see what I've shot that day. Not only is it rewarding to see the result, which is probably 15 to 20 seconds of footage per day of shoots, but also get a sense of continuity. Is there a good flow? Is everything there? Or maybe there's a scene missing or something that I need to shoot so that for the next day I'm well prepared and know what I need to do next. So when you come to editing my video, the main software I use is LIGHTWORKS. To fix things, I use a combination of Photoshop and After Effects. To buy my music, I use AUDIOJUNGLE. And to find the voice actor and the new sound designer, I use the platform Fiverr. So there you go. Those are all the secrets of how I shot my latest animation. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully you've learned something that it can help with your own project, to move forward, to do something absolutely amazing on your own. I've been lucky to do stop animation for a year and a half now. And if you look at the evolution on my YouTube channel, you can see from the earliest, quite crude animation to slowly understanding all the principles and try to get better at it. And the most important thing, practice, practice, practice. I hope that it will motivate you to improve and create an animation of your own that you can be really proud of, because I believe there's really something unique and magical in stop motion animation, and I hope you give it a shot and try it on your own to see how you can tell your own story your way. Take care.